Moving on, SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter is briefing the media on the preliminary revenue outcome for the 2023-2024 financial year. We're crossing live to that in Pretoria.
From the 4.3% forecast in the 2023 medium-term budget policy statement in October. Accordingly, in February 2024, revenue was revised upwards by 700 million rand from the October estimate to a new estimate of 1.731 trillion. The International Monetary Fund projects a steady growth in the next 2 years, which may moderately assist South Africa's economic growth prospects. Our economy yet continue to face many challenges. The negative impact of load shedding, as well as the impaired port and logistics operations, continue to constrain growth, as well as development prospects and consequently tax revenues. My colleagues at the OECD, my fellow heads of tax around the world, all report that the recovery of tax debt, the proliferation of tax crime, are growing risks that we face. Whilst technology-driven innovation presents a huge opportunity as we adapt to an evolving and disruptive age of new business models. During tough economic cycles, SARS's administrative efforts becomes even more impactful. Our compliance program, which is a comprehensive program of administrative actions by SARS, goes a long way to underpin the revenue loss due to economic challenges and addresses non-compliance. I now present the preliminary headline results for the past year. For the financial year that ended at midnight 31 March 2024, I am pleased to announce that we have collected gross tax revenue of 2.155 trillion in line with the revised estimate, representing a year-on-year growth of 4.2% against a nominal GDP of 4.9%. Net revenue, which is the revenue after refunds have been paid to taxpayers, amounts to 1.741 trillion, which exceeds the revised estimate set by the Minister of Finance by some 10 billion rand, representing a year-on-year growth of 3.2% or 54.2 billion rand more than last year. This revenue performance translates to a tax to GDP ratio of 24.7% and a provisional tax buoyancy ratio of 0.9% at gross level and 0.7% at net revenues. Refunds that we've returned to taxpayer of 414 billion represents a year-on-year growth of 8.6% and is the highest quantum of refunds paid out in our history, up 33 billion from prior year. Just in VAT refunds, the amount of 343 billion represents a growth of 7.5% since the prior year. Noteworthy is that refunds represent about 6% of GDP. It is therefore pleasing that 120 billion of these refunds were directed to SMMEs and 37 billion to individuals. This is good when business and individuals remain cash-strapped. Refunds is often a form of funding during troubled times. Whilst we are pleased that the 414 billion rand returned into the hands of taxpayers is good for the economy, I remain concerned about fraud and abuse of our refund system. In the period under review, SARS was able to prevent the outflow of 101 billion rand of impermissible or fraudulent refunds and secure a number of successful fraud prosecutions. So you can imagine 101 billion rand would not be in the fiscus. It would be in the hand of criminals and fraudsters if we have not built our capability for fraud risk detection. In trade facilitation for the year under review, SARS Customs facilitated a total number of 8.5 million trade transactions amounting to 3.96 trillion rand. Exports amounted to just over 2 trillion rand, whilst imports was 1.937 trillion, resulting in a trade balance surplus of 11 billion rand. Our program for authorized economic operators, which is really designed to give traders a green lane experience should they be accredited and maintain the high levels of compliance, I'm pleased to say that this year we added a further 145 new licensees, bringing the total number of AEO licensees to 304. In our compliance environment, an encouraging trend, slow but encouraging, is that we have increased our compliance index, our voluntary compliance index, from 61.6 to 63.9%. This index is we developed in 2020 in support of our strategic intent of voluntary compliance, and measures the overall compliance behavior of taxpayers across the compliance value chain of registration, filing, declaration, and payment. It does not yet include taxpayers who ought to be registered but are not. And the work of broadening our tax base, improving the integrity of our register, and improving the overall compliance continues. As far as public confidence are concerned, it is noteworthy that in this regard, public confidence in SARS is improving. So we're collecting more taxes, but what is counterintuitive, because of the professionalism and work demands that we set on ourselves, is that even though we are collecting taxes more efficiently, the survey that we have conducted again shows an increase from 71.8% to 77.5% in this year. And the main contributing themes being operational efficiency, tax morality, tax diligence, and accessibility and trustworthiness of SARS. And we would be the first to say that we need to do a lot more and work a lot harder to earn public trust. But these measures do augur well for improving tax compliance in our environment and support our strategic intent of voluntary compliance. I'd like to share with you now a breakdown of revenue by tax product. We call tax products, the various tax types. I will report the significant tax product contributors that support this positive revenue performance for the year. And for each of the main taxes, I will first report the outcome. Then I will share with you the economic, tax policy, and base effect factors that have led to this increase. And then for each one, share with you the highlights and actions that derive from our compliance program. And so I will use that framework for each of the taxes. Therefore, firstly, for income tax, taxes from individuals, or what we call PIT, which represents 37.4% of total net revenue, gross revenue of 692 billion was collected, which is 53 billion more, or 8.3% than the prior year. In refunds, 40.5 billion refunds was paid out, 3.8 billion more, or 10.3% prior year, leaving a net revenue from personal income taxes of 651 billion, or 49.5 billion, or 8.2% more than prior year. Underlying this result, from the economy, tax policy, and base effects, personal income taxes were impacted by slow economic growth and unemployment. Total employment, as per the quarterly employment survey, increased by only 98,000 year on year, mainly from agriculture, finance, agencies, retail trade, wholesale sectors. The wage bill improved from an annual average increase of 6% in the prior year to 6.3% in the year under review, with higher bonus payouts and share incentives mainly from the finance sectors. The PIT register grew by 1.1 million individuals, mainly job seekers or employees below the tax threshold. Only 7,300 individuals contributed a total of 639 additional tax revenue. In addition, 39,900 new employers voluntarily registered for pay-as-you-earn, of which 19,000 contributed 2.7 billion additional taxes, bringing the new revenue under this category from additional registrants to 3.4 billion the year under review. And so you can see how important our base broadening and improving the integrity of our register. From the compliance program interventions in individual taxes, this resulted in a total additional revenue of 54.8 billion in the following way. Through our continued application of third-party data sources and automation, we were able to provide a seamless experience to some 4 million taxpayers who were assessed without having to submit a return. In this process, an additional 2.5 million individual taxpayer returns were processed, in which we detected instances of under-declaration of income, as well as prevented impermissible refunds, adding a combined value of 21.5 billion rand, which would not have been the fiscus had we not executed this work. Those who did submit a return, by the way, would have received their assessment in under 5 seconds, world-class by any standards, and if not selected by our risk engine for further investigation, would have received their refund in under 72 hours. We collected a further 24.7 billion rand in outstanding debt and completed 85 lifestyle and luxury vehicle audits that added 850 million rand. We completed 47 ETI audits totaling 261 million. And we are currently, because this is an area of abuse, we are currently putting a test case which comes up in May month at the courts to decide on a matter that involves 398 cases with a value of 2.9 billion. And going to court will set an important precedent and provide certainty and clarity to taxpayers. We collected 190 million, mainly from high wealth taxpayers who underpaid their provisional taxes by invoking what we call paragraph 19.3. And 1.5 billion in revenues was collected from individuals through our voluntary disclosure program. Other compliance interventions totaled 6.1 billion. That moves on to the second tax type, value-added tax, which is 25.7% of our total tax revenue, where we collected gross revenue of 790 billion, or 49.2 billion higher, 6.6% higher than the previous year. Refunds, as you heard, 342 billion, or 23.9 billion, or 7.5% more than the prior year, leaving a net VAT collection of 447 billion, or 25.5 billion more than last year, 6%. From the economic, tax policy and base effects, gross domestic VAT collected for the year under review amounted to 525.7 billion, with a prior year increase of 39.2 billion. Growth in domestic VAT remains robust despite a slowing down in nominal household consumption. Most of the domestic VAT recovery came primarily from finance, manufacturing, and the wholesale sectors. This growth was partially offset by a decline in the mining sector. The year-on-year growth rate of 8% is higher than the average monthly CPI rate of 5.5% for the period April 2023 to February 2024. Higher import VAT amounted to 264.9 billion, representing a growth of 3.9%, or 10 billion higher. This growth resulted from increased demand for capital goods, in amongst others original equipment components, motor vehicles parts, solar energy related equipment, and pneumatic tires. The VAT refund growth this year was 7.5%, moderating from the higher growth of over 20% from each of the previous years respectively. This growth has come from electricity, finance, and mining sectors, respectively. This refund growth from electricity, finance, and mining sectors, respectively, due to the increase in exports and investments by mining companies. And furthermore, our declaration data show that there is a growth in refunds due to 15.5% year-on-year growth in claims and 20% growth in input tax cost, consistent with high zero-rated sales and investments in solar-related projects. However, the growth in imported tax cost claims started to reduce, with some of the tax periods showing year-on-year contractions. And as I pointed out, the increasing vigilance of refund fraud risk detection has also brought about a slowdown in the growth of refunds. The tax register grew by 57,700 new vendors, of which 14,200 contributed 4.4 billion in gross revenues in the year under review. From the compliance program interventions in VAT, we collected an additional 116 billion rand. Due to the growing risk of VAT fraud, we have increased our focus on augmenting refund verification with AI-enabled fraud risk detection method tools, and this work has prevented the outflow of impermissible and/or fraudulent refunds totaling 55.3 billion in VAT, which is up 11 billion compared to last year. In addition, we have collected 39.7 billion of outstanding VAT debt, and interventions targeting syndicated tax and customs crimes.
And that is SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter delivering the revenue outcomes for the 2023-2024 financial year, noting that SARS collected 2.1 trillion rand when it comes to tax collections, and that's a growth of 4.2%. And also noting there that the net revenue of 1.7 trillion rand exceeding the revenue collected previous year, and that is by 3.2%. What was also quite fascinating there is that the refunds in total, they dispersed about 414 billion rand of refunds there, the highest quantum that we've seen when it comes to SARS. They're noting there that it actually was directed to SMMEs as well as individuals. They managed to prevent about 101 billion rand of refunds that were not meant to be sent out, and these were related to fraud and abuse. So it's also quite noticeable to say for him, rather him saying that public confidence is improving when it comes to the public's view on SARS. And what was also quite fascinating, SARS Commissioner noting that in the last business days of this financial year, they collected 144 billion rand, which was the equivalent of what they had collected back in 1996. So that was the visuals that you were seeing there with SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter.